The Bajoran warships quaked as Earth's secret dreadnought exploded from Jupiter's shadow, monstrous human cannons primed, aiming to paint the void with alien blood. Pixis knew instantly he'd fucked up. When those Bajoran bastards showed up at our doorstep, demanding we grovel like dogs, we thought we were dead meat. Deader than dead, I laughed, leaning across the bar as the gaggle of Academy rookies clung to my every word. But we had a surprise for them. I could still picture Captain Petrov on that fateful day decades ago, gazing resolutely at the measly Terran fleet display, our paltry ships blinking pathetically against the red swarm of Bajoran cruisers. They had us outgunned 100 to 1, outclassed in every way, or so it seemed. We all knew this day would come. We all knew we would not be alone in this universe forever, Petrov addressed us grimly. But I'll be damned if we're going to roll over and show our bellies to these alien bastards on our first outing. As a young lieutenant aboard the ETS Dauntless, my knuckles clenched white on my console. We all knew this was suicide. Earth had barely begun to reach out into the stars when the Bajorans bulldozed into the Sol system, a ruthless stellar empire with technology centuries beyond ours. Led by Pixis the Butcher, scourge of a dozen worlds, they gave us one Earth day to surrender. One day. But if we surrendered, humanity was finished before we'd begun. If we fought, though, we'd be slaughtered. The Dauntless and our ragtag fleet of mining barges and research skiffs would be nothing but smears on Bajoran hulls. So as the deadline elapsed and the Bajoran ships surged forward, we could only watch, hearts in our throats, as alarms suddenly wailed. The sensor officer gasped. Massive energy signature. Behind Jupiter, something's... Every jaw on the bridge dropped as a behemoth erupted from Jupiter's shadow. A ship so vast it defied belief. Titanium armor bristled with city-melting cannons and continent-cracking missiles. A dreadnought. Our dreadnought. Impossible, yet there it was, a colossus secretly forged in Jovian docks, now heralding a fleet of Earth warships that poured forth like avenging angels. In the face of this shocking show of force, the Bajorans froze, for now. But would they still attack? Would our secret fleet be enough? As the two armadas faced off, all our lives hung on a knife's edge. The Dauntless shuddered as the Bajoran ship surged forward. Dylan clenched his teeth, bracing for impact and certain we were done for. But then a voice crackled over the comms, a voice that would become legendary. Admiral Nikola Radic, commander of the Earth Defense Fleet, he introduced himself, his scarred, weathered face appearing on the view screen. An imposing man in his 60s, Radic had clearly seen some shit in his day. He wasted no time delivering an ultimatum to that Bajoran scumbag Pixis. Attention, Bajoran vessels. You have entered the sovereign territory of the human race and threatened our people with destruction. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Pixis's ugly mug filled the screen in response. The pale, hairless freak looked like something out of a nightmare, with those dead black eyes and mouth full of needles. He sneered at Radic's warning. Your primitive vessels are no match for the might of the Bajoran Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and we will make an example of your pathetic species. But Radic didn't even flinch. You underestimate us at your peril, Pixis. We may be new to the galactic stage, but we are not defenseless. This is your final warning. Withdraw or be destroyed. Pixis just snarled some alien insult and cut the comm. The Bajoran ships kept coming, weapons hot. We all held our breath, waiting for the hammer to fall. But as the enemy entered range, our dreadnought opened up and all hell broke loose. Searing beams of pure destruction erupted from the mighty ship, tearing through the Bajoran shields like they were tissue paper. 3 alien vessels just vanished, vaporized instantly. More reeled away, crippled, belching flames and shrapnel. The Bajoran advance crumbled as their ships scattered in disarray. Cheers erupted across the Dauntless bridge. Against all odds, we were actually holding our own. Seemed humanity had an ace up its sleeve after all. All ships forward, Radic barked. Flank the dreadnought and engage at will. Let's send these alien bastards back to whatever hole they crawled out of. The Earth Defense Fleet shot forward, racing to press the attack. The Bajorans were in for one hell of a fight. And let me tell you, with our secret fleet unleashed, the Bajorans were in for one hell of a nasty surprise. Our nimble ships darted around those clunky alien buckets, pot-shotting them to pieces with surgical hits. The dreadnought just laughed off their panicked shots, pounding them with broadsides that tore ships apart. Then, in the middle of the shitstorm, Captain Petrov gets a call from the big man himself, Admiral Radich. The grizzled admiral popped up on our screen, his face all business. "Captain Petrov, we've got a critical job for the Dauntless. Intel says the Bajoran flagship Vortex has a heavy-duty comm system. We think the bastards are trying to phone home for backup," Radich said. Petrov got it instantly. If the Bajorans got a message out, we'd have a whole damn alien fleet crawling up our asses. "Your orders are to take out that comms array, whatever it takes. Blow it to hell. Earth is counting on you," Radich ordered. "Aye, aye, sir," Petrov replied. He whipped the Dauntless around and we gunned it for the Vortex. That Bajoran flagship was one mean motherfucker, bristling with more guns than a Texas militia rally. They hammered us hard, and our shields screamed, pushed to the breaking point. But Petrov was ice cold, never flinching. We got in knife fight range with the Vortex, and Petrov gave the word. A swarm of drones spat out of our launch tubes, each one packing an antimatter bomb. Those robo-kamikazes juked and jived, dodging the Vortex's flak like pros. Not all made it through, but plenty did. They smashed into the alien shields and blew, lighting up space. We hit that alien bastard with everything we had, beams gouging into naked hull, ripping through decks, shredding armor. The Vortex buckled, secondary explosions chewing it up from the inside. The Bajoran flagship went up like a mini supernova, spewing fire and guts. Nothing left but drifting scrap. The crew went apeshit. We'd done it, we'd taken out their alpha dog, maybe we had a shot at this after all. With the Vortex a shattered hulk, Pixis presumed vaporized, the Bajoran lines faltered. We'd cut the head off the snake. The alien bastards milled in confusion, not knowing whether to shit or go blind without their flagship cracking the whip. Ragged cheers erupted across the Terran fleet. For a shining moment it seemed we'd snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. But war has a way of pissing on your parade. Just when you think you've got the upper hand, it knees you in the balls. "More ships dropping out of hyperspace," the sensor officer cried. "A whole damn Bajoran armada." My guts turned to ice water as I watched the new red dots flood the tactical display. The first fleet had been the tip of the spear. Now the rest of it was punching through, already launching missiles as they rushed to avenge their buddies. Our point defense grid lit up space, filling the void with crisscrossing beams. We swatted dozens of missiles from the black, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly. The Bajoran warheads struck home in blinding flashes. The Dauntless lurched like a kicked dog, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Damage alarms howled. The dreadnought was faring better, absorbing the brunt of the hammering on its thicker armor. But for every missile it shrugged off, 3 more human ships bled air and men. They couldn't trade punches with this many Bajoran heavies. Not for long. Radich's face suddenly filled the view screen, looking like he'd aged a decade in minutes. The lights flickered behind him, his bridge crew scrambling frantically. "All ships, this is Admiral Radich," he said, his voice cracking under the strain. "Prepare to execute Contingency Plan Omega. I repeat, execute Contingency Plan Omega." Petrov went pale as the blood drained from his face. He exchanged a stricken look with his XO. "Omega? But sir, that's—" The XO just nodded grimly. "I know, Mikhail, but if the Admiral is giving that order, it must be our last resort." At the time I had no idea what the hell Omega was, above my pay grade, but the ashen looks on the bridge officers' faces told me it was bad juju. Real bad. The fleet began a coordinated fighting retreat, giving ground to the swarming Bajorans. As we pulled back, the first ships started going up, Terran frigates and destroyers, overloading their reactors, turning themselves into short-lived suns. The blasts tore massive holes in the Bajoran formation. Alien ships cartwheeled, shedding pieces like leaves in a storm. For a few moments, the relentless advance paused as the Bajorans reeled. But it was a finger in the dike. A desperate ploy to buy time with our lives. The Bajoran reserves just kept coming, an endless tide of warships, hungry for blood. For every one we atomized, 3 more took its place. Looking around at the resolute faces on the dauntless bridge, I knew we were dead men walking, staring down the barrel of extinction. But if humanity was taking its final bow, we'd make it one for the ages. As humanity's desperate gambit played out, defiant ships vanishing in bursts of atomic fire, it seemed our extinction was all but sealed. The Dauntless rattled around me, consoles erupting in showers of sparks. The Bajoran armada fell upon us like ravenous wolves, implacable and unrelenting. But just when we'd given ourselves up for dead, a miracle happened, or so it seemed at the time. As I watched the tactical display in stunned disbelief, a third fleet blinked into existence on the edge of the battlefield. But these ships, they were like nothing I'd ever seen. Sleek, silver, elegant. They made the Bajoran vessels look downright clunky by comparison. For a few heartbeats you could have heard a pin drop on both sides. Human and Bajoran alike, we all just stared, trying to process this cosmic curveball. The fighting actually stopped, if you can believe it. Guess even genocidal aliens can be caught off guard. Then, as we held our collective breath, a voice crackled across every comm channel. A woman's voice, calm and melodic and speaking flawless English. Attention Earth and Bajoran forces. This is Commodore Zara of the Argonian Confederation. We have been monitoring this conflict and cannot stand idly by as a fledgling species faces annihilation. You could have knocked me over with a feather. The Argonian Confederation, who the hell were they? Where did they come from? 1,000 questions raced through my head. But the most pressing one was, were they here to help us or screw us over even worse? As it turned out, the former. The Argonian fleet zipped into position between us and the Bajorans, an impenetrable wall of gleaming silver. They moved like quicksilver, fluid and precise, in a way neither human nor Bajoran ships could match, almost like a dance. The Bajoran fleet, faced with this mysterious new player, wavered in their attack. You could practically taste their hesitation. I mean, I couldn't blame them. If some unknown aliens showed up out of nowhere to crash my genocide party, I'd be a bit skittish too. Commodore Zara spoke again, her voice hardening as she addressed the Bajorans directly. Bajoran forces, you are hereby ordered to stand down and withdraw from this system immediately. The Argonian Confederation will not tolerate the unprovoked aggression you have shown towards the human race. The Bajorans didn't respond at first. Their ships held position, weapons still hot. For a minute there I thought they might just say screw it and take on these Argonian clowns too. But self-preservation won out over bloodlust. To our collective shock, the Bajoran fleet began to disengage. One by one, their ships spun up their hyperdrives and vanished into the void. But the Argonians weren't done with us. Commodore Zara appeared on the view screen again, this time addressing Admiral Radek directly. Admiral, I understand you must have many questions, she said, her tone softening. Please allow me to extend an invitation to you and your officers to come aboard my flagship, the Celestial Harmony. We have much to discuss. Radek looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. He nodded slowly, still processing it all. Thank you, Commodore. We accept your invitation. And that's how I found myself on a shuttle, part of the delegation ferrying over to the Argonian flagship. I still couldn't quite believe it was happening. I kept waiting to wake up back on the Dauntless, or worse, not at all. As our shuttle slipped into the Celestial Harmony's hangar bay, my stomach churned with a mix of nerves and anticipation. What would these aliens be like? Why had they saved us? And most importantly, what did they want in return? I glanced around at the others, Radek, Petrov, the XO, a few other shell-shocked officers. They looked how I felt, like we were in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Jury was still out. The shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle thud, the hatch hissing open. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Time to meet our saviors. As the airlock doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, we stepped into another world. Our jaws hit the deck as we took in the celestial harmony's gleaming interior, a symphony of sleek lines and shimmering lights that made the Dauntless look like a caveman's rock. Strange symbols scrolled along holographic displays lining the walls, while glowing conduits pulsed with an eerie luminescence. The air itself seemed to hum with barely restrained power. It was like stepping into the pages of a science fiction novel, except this was real. Pinch me, slap my ass real. Slap my ass. A pair of tall, willowy Argonians glided forward to greet us, their skin shimmering with iridescent hues that shifted like oil on water. Oval eyes regarded us with a serene intensity, colors swirling from silver to blue to violet. They escorted us through the ship, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous corridors. Everywhere we looked, wonders awaited. A transparent viewport revealed the whirling maelstrom of a miniature black hole suspended in an energy field. Another chamber pulsed with the cool blue glow of row upon row of stasis pods, contents hidden. After an elevator ride that made our stomachs lurch, we emerged onto the bridge, a vaulted expanse with a dizzying view of the stars. Waiting for us was an Argonian who could only be Zara, tall and regal in a shimmering white uniform. "Welcome aboard the Celestial Harmony, Admiral Radek, and to you and your brave crew," she said, voice chiming like bells. "Your species has shown remarkable resilience and courage in the face of overwhelming odds." Radek looked like a schoolboy called before the principal, all puffed-up importance deflated in the face of this alien majesty. He managed a nod. "Thank you, Commodore Zara. We owe you and your people a debt we can never repay. But I must ask, why did you intervene on our behalf?" Zara's expression turned somber, her eyes shifting to a deep blue. I couldn't stop staring at those eyes, watching the play of colors like a kaleidoscope. "The Argonian Confederation has a long history of defending those who cannot defend themselves. When we detected the Bajoran incursion into your system, we knew we could not stand idly by." She paused as if weighing her words. The silence stretched, the human delegation shifting nervously. I felt like an ant under a magnifying glass. "But there is more to it than that. The truth is, Admiral, we have been observing your species for some time. We believe that humanity has the potential to become a great force for good in the galaxy, but also a great force for destruction, if not guided properly." You could have heard a pin drop. The implications hit like a punch to the gut. This advanced race had been watching us, judging us. It was both humbling and terrifying. Zara spread her hands. "We seek not to control but to mentor. The Argonian Confederation offers an alliance, a sharing of knowledge and resources. We can help you rebuild your fleet, strengthen your defenses, and take your place among the stars. But the choice must be yours." She fixed Radek with a stare that seemed to pierce his soul. "Will you accept our offer, Admiral? Will you let us help guide humanity towards a brighter future?" Heavy silence followed, thick enough to taste. I watched Radek's face, seeing the war behind his eyes, the desire to protect our independence versus the desperate need for allies, the fate of our race hanging in the balance. Finally, Radek squared his shoulders and nodded. "On behalf of the people of Earth, I accept your offer, Commodore Zara. Let us forge an alliance that will stand the test of time." As they clasped hands, sealing the deal with an otherworldly electric tingle, I felt a shiver down my spine. A sense that humanity's path had just taken a sharp left turn into uncharted space. The Argonians were a riddle wrapped in an enigma, and we were jumping in with both feet. God help us all. I caught Captain Petrov's eye as we filed out to be shown to our quarters. The normally unflappable man looked shaken, face drawn and pale. He met my gaze, giving a minuscule shake of his head, a silent warning. Trust but verify. Our new friends might have pulled our asses out of the fire, but I had a feeling the flames were far from extinguished. As the celestial harmony hummed around us, a living mystery, I couldn't shake the sense that we were sailing into the unknown. Brave new world indeed. As humanity stood at the precipice of a new era, the alliance with the Argonians promised to reshape our civilization in profound and startling ways. Almost overnight, Argonian tech began weaving its way into every facet of human life. But not all that glittered was gold. I remember walking down the streets of New York in those early days, marveling at the changes. Hollow ads flickered with Argonian symbols, hawking everything from fusion reactors to gene therapies. Skylines once dominated by steel and concrete now gleamed with alien alloys, shimmering spires that reached for the stars. And the stars were closer than ever. The once shattered Earth defense fleet, now bolstered by Argonian know-how, stood proud once more. Sleek new ships rolled off assembly lines, their hulls emblazoned with the joint emblems of Earth and Argonia. Young recruits flocked to the ranks, eager to crew these marvels and carry the torch of human-Argonian cooperation to the cosmos. But for all the dazzling progress, a shadow crept in the streets, whispers of unease, of mistrust. Who were these aliens, really? What did they want? Were we trading one yoke for another? Tensions reached a boiling point when General Alexei Volkov took the stage. A living legend, the hero of a dozen battles, his voice carried weight, and his words carried fire. "Have we forgotten so easily?" he boomed, his craggy face filling every screen from Earth to the Ort. "Have we forgotten the blood spilled, the sacrifices made to claw our way out from under the boot of alien tyranny?" Volkov's words ignited a firestorm. Protests erupted across worlds, angry masses demanding an end to the alliance. "Earth for Earthlings," they chanted. "Humanity first." And yet the Argonians seemed untouched by the furor. Commodore Zara went about her business with serene grace, her delegation the picture of composure. "Our respect for human self-determination is absolute," she assured the media with a gentle smile. "This decision must be yours and yours alone." But behind closed doors, a different story unfolded. In the shadowed halls of power, urgent whispers raced like wildfire. The mood in the room plummeted to Arctic depths as Zara laid out the grim truth. The Bajoran Empire, it seemed, had been busy. Bruised and bloodied, but far from broken, they now marshaled the fury of a dozen vassal races, all hungry to put the upstart humans in their place. "They paint you as a threat," Zara said softly, "a cancer to be cut out before it spreads. And this time they will not stop until your worlds are cinders." You could have heard a pin drop in that room. The air itself seemed to tremble with the weight of her words. I watched the blood drain from Admiral Radich's face, his shoulders slumping as if physically struck. "Then we fight," he said at last, his voice leaden. "The Earth Defense Fleet will stand against them." But Zara shook her head, her eyes twin pools of quicksilver. "Your fleet is strong, Admiral, but it is not ready, not for this. You need more time, more preparation." She paused, and in that pause 1,000 possibilities bloomed and died. The fate of worlds balanced on a razor's edge. "But there may be another way," Zara said at last. "A way to buy the time you need and to send a message to the galaxy that humanity will not be cowed." Every eye in the room locked on her, hanging on her every word. In that moment she held the future in her slender hands. "Tell us," Radich said, leaning forward, "please." And so with the storm clouds of war gathering on the horizon, and the very soul of humanity at stake, Zara began to speak. In the belly of that Argonian stealth ship, adrenaline pounded through our veins. My strike team, the best and brightest of Earth's warriors, stood ready, eyes hard and jaws set. Months of brutal training had honed us to a razor's edge, forging bonds stronger than steel between human and Argonian alike. As we slipped through Bajoran space, the very air seemed to hum with tension. One mistake, one errant sensor ping, and we were dead. The shipyard loomed ahead, a monstrous labyrinth of docks and assembly lines, bristling with enough firepower to glass a planet. Intel said the bulk of the Bajoran fleet was docked there, undergoing repairs and refits, ripe for the picking. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot called, his voice cool and steady. "Cloaking field holding, they don't see us coming." I looked around at my team. seeing the same fire in their eyes that I felt in my own. We all knew the stakes. Earth, our home, teetered on the brink. The Bajorans were coming, backed by a host of alien nasties, all too eager to put us in our place. This raid was our shot across the bow, our way of telling them that humanity would not go quietly into the night. We would fight. We would make them bleed for every inch. As the shipyard grew in the viewports, I gathered my soldiers in the drop bay. Human and Argonian, standing shoulder to shoulder, united in purpose. I met each of their gazes in turn, seeing the trust, the determination there. "Remember this moment," I told them, my voice ringing with conviction. "Remember that when the call came, when our world and our way of life hung in the balance, you answered. You stood up, you stepped forward, and you said, 'I will go.' Whatever happens today, that courage, that selflessness will never be forgotten." A chorus of nods, a rumble of assent. They were with me to the end. The ship shuddered as the docking clamps engaged, the hatch hissing open. "Go, go, go," I roared, and we surged out into the shipyard like the hounds of hell. Alarms wailed, Bajoran soldiers shouting in confusion and fear as we materialized out of thin air. They opened fire, a storm of laser bolts filling the air, but we were already moving. Argonian tech shimmered around us, personal shield units deflecting the worst of it. We returned fire on the run, plasma rifles bucking in our hands, dropping Bajorans left and right. I vaulted over a railing, landing in a knot of enemies. My rifle barked, point-blank shots boiling through armor and bone. An Argonian commando fought at my side, her movements a blur, a deadly dance of blades and laser fire. We cut through them like a scythe through wheat, never stopping, never slowing. The shipyard shook as the first of our charges went off, a series of thunderous detonations that sent gouts of fire and debris spewing into space. Docked ships reeled drunkenly, secondary explosions rippling along their hulls. A savage grin split my face. It was working. My team surged ahead, splitting into prearranged squads. Some peeled off to plant more explosives at key structural points, others to sabotage critical systems, engines, life support, weapons. The rest formed a cordon around them, holding the perimeter against the Bajoran counterattack. It was chaos, a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel, of strobing emergency lights and the screams of the dying. The air reeked of ozone and scorched metal, of blood and burnt flesh. I fought at the center of it all, rifle flashing, barking orders, rallying my soldiers. We were the tip of the spear, and we would not break. A Bajoran war droid loomed out of the smoke, a hulking monstrosity bristling with gun barrels and grasping claws. It fixed on me with soulless red eyes and charged, the deck shuddering under its tread. I snarled, meeting it head-on. Plasma bolts splashed off its armored hide as I closed the distance, ducking under a sweeping claw to jam my rifle into a gap at its neck joint. I pulled the trigger, the shot tearing through vital circuitry in a shower of sparks. The droid convulsed, toppling like a felled tree. No time to catch my breath. More were coming, an endless tide of Bajoran metal and fury. My rifle clicked empty and I cast it aside, drawing the Argonian power blade at my hip. The shipyard had become a labyrinth of smoke and fire, of twisted wreckage and hissing steam vents. My armor was pitted and scorched, my face streaked with sweat and grime. But still I fought on, hacking and slashing, rallying my battered warriors for one last push. This was our moment, our chance to strike a blow for Earth and for all the free peoples of the galaxy. We would not fail. We could not fail. As I led the charge into the heart of the maelstrom, I held that truth close, a fire in my blood, a war cry on my lips. For Earth, for humanity. The battle raged, a desperate, brutal struggle at the heart of the enemy stronghold. Bajoran soldiers swarmed from every side, a tide of armored bodies and flashing weapons. Drones buzzed and swooped, strafing with lasers, harrying our advance. The shipyard itself seemed to fight us, automated defenses coming alive, energy fields and blast doors sealing off our routes. But we would not be denied. Not this day. Step by blood-soaked step, we pushed deeper into the labyrinthine docks, leaving a trail of shattered Bajoran bodies in our wake. Explosions shook the vast structure as our charges went off, secondary blasts chaining through fuel lines and ammo dumps. Docked ships shuddered and slewed, slabs of armor plating shearing away, atmosphere belching from rent hulls. I remember the faces of my soldiers in those desperate hours, human and Argonian alike, lit by the strobe of muzzle flashes and the hellish glow of fires, faces contorted in rage and pain, in grim determination and fierce, savage joy. We were brothers and sisters forged in the crucible of war, bound by blood and purpose. Sergeant Hawkins, a bear of a man, laughing as he mowed down a charging squad with his chain gun. Zorax, the Argonian tech specialist, his long fingers flying over a console even as laser fire stitched the wall above his head, shutting down the shipyard's energy grid with a final triumphant keystroke. Private Okafor, barely 18, screaming defiance as she hurled herself at a hulking Bajoran battlesuit, jamming a DEET pack into its knee joint a half-second before it liquefied her with a point-blank cannon shot. These were my comrades, my family, and they were giving their all, holding nothing back. Even as our numbers dwindled, as the wounded piled up and the dead lay where they fell, we kept pushing, kept fighting. Because we knew what was at stake, the survival of our species, the fate of our worlds. At last we reached the shipyard's central control nexus, the heart of the Bajoran fleet's logistical and command network. It was a fortress within a fortress, heavily shielded and guarded by the enemy's most elite troops. By this point, my strike team was a battered remnant, exhausted, bleeding, running low on ammo and hope. But in their eyes I saw the same fire that had carried us this far, the unbreakable will of humanity. "This is it," I told them, my voice raw, barely audible over the drumbeat of distant explosions. "One last push. We crack this nut, and the Bajoran war machine grinds to a halt. You know what's at stake. For Earth." "For Earth," they roared back. And with that battle cry on our lips, we stormed the Nexus. It was a blur of fire and blood, a close-quarters melee where laser met blade and armored bodies slammed together. Consoles shattered, circuits fried, the air choked with the stench of melted polymers and charred meat. And at the end, as the last Bajoran fell and the room lay still but for the moans of the wounded, as I stood there among the wreckage, gasping and spent, I saw it. The master control terminal, its holoscreen still glowing a baleful red, the key to the Bajoran fleet's digital guts. With a growl of effort, I hauled myself over to it, blood leaking from a dozen wounds. My fingers danced across the keys, inputting the viral code the Argonians had given us. The red light flashed, flickered, and faded to dull maroon. It was done. The shipyard systems were crashing, its automated repair facilities and fleet coordination network collapsing into chaos. Aboard scores of docked Bajoran ships, vital systems blinked out, engines sputtered and died, weapons fell silent. The enemy was crippled, at least for a time, maybe long enough. I slumped against the console, my vision graying at the edges. I heard my soldiers cheering, weeping, a ragged chorus of victory and loss. We had done it. We had struck our blow. But in that moment, bleeding and broken, my brothers and sisters in arms rising to carry me out, I allowed myself a grim smile. Let them come. If this day had proven anything, it was this. But as Dylan and his battered strike team made their daring escape through the disintegrating shipyard, threading the gauntlet of explosions and debris, a cruel twist of fate awaited them. In the chaos of the raid, as Dylan rallied his troops for the final push, an urgent cry crackled over the comms. "Commodore Zara is hit. Repeat, the Commodore is down." Dylan's blood ran cold. He whipped around, his eyes frantically searching the smoke-choked battlefield. There, amid the twisted wreckage, he saw her, Zara, the indomitable Argonian leader, sprawled on the deck, her silvery blood pooling beneath her. A Bajoran security drone loomed over her fallen form, its weapon still smoking. Zara had thrown herself into the line of fire, shielding her retreating troops with her own body. The drone swiveled, seeking new targets, but Dylan was already moving. He charged through the maelstrom, his rifle bucking in his hands, rounds tearing into the drone's armored carapace. The machine staggered, sparks flying from ruptured circuits, but still it advanced, relentless. Dylan closed the distance, a battle cry tearing from his throat. He rammed the butt of his rifle into the drone's optical cluster, shattering it in a spray of glass and metal. The machine toppled, but the damage was done. Dylan fell to his knees beside Zara, cradling her broken form. Her eyes, once so vibrant, now flickered with fading light. Silver blood bubbled at her lips as she tried to speak. "Shh, don't talk," Dylan choked out, his vision blurring with tears. "We did it, Zara. The shipyard is destroyed. You bought us the time we needed." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Good, that's good. Dylan, you must lead them now, our people, together." Her voice trailed off, her eyes drifting shut. Dylan bowed his head, a sob wrenching from his chest. Around him, the battle still raged, but in that moment, the universe narrowed to this single point of grief, of loss. With gentle hands, he lifted Zara's body, bearing her back to the waiting strike ship. She would be honored, he vowed. Her sacrifice would not be forgotten. As the strike force made their harrowing escape, punching through the disintegrating Bajoran lines, Dylan clung to that promise. Zara's loss cut deep, a wound that would never truly heal, but her legacy would endure. The alliance she had forged, the dream of human and Argonian unity, would be her monument. In the days that followed, as news of the daring raid spread like wildfire across the galaxy, the repercussions were swift and seismic. The Bajorans, reeling from the devastating blow, suddenly found themselves on the back foot, their aura of invincibility shattered. Their allies, once so eager to join the crusade against Earth, now wavered, questioning the wisdom of aligning with a power so decisively outmaneuvered. The Argonian Confederation seized the initiative, their diplomats working tirelessly to capitalize on the shifting tide. In a series of secret negotiations and public overtures, they rallied the galaxy's neutral powers, forging a coalition united in its determination to check Bajoran aggression. Whispers of containment and sanctions swirled through the halls of power, a rising chorus of condemnation. For the humans, the change was no less profound. In the span of a single daring strike, they had rewritten the galactic narrative. No longer the upstarts, the pawns in the games of greater powers, they now stood tall, commanding respect and wary admiration in equal measure. On Earth, the raid's survivors returned to a hero's welcome, their names etched into the annals of history. But for Dylan and his comrades, the accolades rang hollow. In the stillness of ship's night, in the quiet moments between the celebrations and the speeches, they grappled with the weight of their losses, the scars that would never fade. Dylan, his heart heavy with the memory of Zara's sacrifice, threw himself into the work of diplomacy, determined to carry forward the vision she had died for. In council chambers and conference rooms, he fought for the alliance, for the dream of a future where human and Argonian stood side by side as equals. But even as the bonds between their peoples grew stronger, tempered in the forge of shared loss and sacrifice, Dylan knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The Bajorans, though bloodied, were far from beaten, and the galaxy was vast, filled with untold dangers lurking in the dark between the stars. And so, as he stood before the solemn gathering of Earth and Argonian leaders, preparing to eulogize the fallen Commodore, Dylan steeled himself for the trials to come. Zara's memory would be his lodestar, her sacrifice a constant reminder of the price of failure. "Commodore Zara was a true friend to humanity," he began, his voice thick with emotion, the words tearing at his throat. "She believed in us when we hardly believed in ourselves. She saw not just who we are, but who we could be, and she was willing to give her life to defend that vision." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled mourners, human and Argonian alike, united in their grief and their resolve. "Let us honor her memory, not just with words, but with deeds. Let us strive to be worthy of the faith she placed in us, to build a future of cooperation and understanding between our peoples. For in the end, that is the only way to ensure that her sacrifice and the sacrifices of all those who fell was not in vain. As Dylan stepped back from the podium, the gathered leaders rose as one, a standing ovation that shook the rafters. In that moment, as the applause washed over him, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders, the mantle of leadership settling upon him like a shroud. The road ahead would be long and hard, the challenges daunting. The Bajorans, for all their losses, remained a formidable foe, and the galaxy was vast, filled with dangers yet undreamed of. But in that moment, buoyed by the solidarity of his fellow humans and the unwavering support of his Argonian allies, Dylan allowed himself to hope. Hope for a future where the sacrifices of the fallen were remembered and honored. Hope for a galaxy where the strong stood with the weak, where the light of cooperation and understanding banished the darkness of aggression and fear. The gathered mourners filed out of the hall, their faces etched with grief and determination. Dylan lingered a moment longer, his hand resting on the polished wood of the podium. In the silence, he could almost hear Zara's voice, a whisper on the edge of memory. "Remember, Dylan," she seemed to say, her words an echo of their last conversation. "The road ahead will be hard, but you are not alone. You carry the hopes of both our peoples now. Lead them well." Dylan nodded a silent promise to the fallen Commodore. He would lead, as she had led. He would fight as she had fought. And he would never forget the price of failure, the cost of surrender. With a final, lingering look at the hall, Dylan turned and strode out into the waiting world, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, but he would walk it with his head held high, carrying the memory of the fallen and the hope of the living in his heart. The years passed, and as humanity and the Argonians worked hand in hand to rebuild from the devastation of the Bajoran conflict, a new age dawned. With our alien foes reeling from their losses, licking their wounds in some distant corner of the galaxy, we turned our eyes to the stars once more. Our appetite for exploration and discovery rekindled. Leading the charge was none other than Dylan, now a commander in his own right, his exploits in the war having earned him a place in the annals of history. Under his command, Earth's finest ships ventured forth into the unknown, seeking out new frontiers, new allies, and new wonders to behold. I remember the day Dylan's ship, the Trailblazer, returned from one of its longest expeditions yet. The entire planet held its breath as the sleek vessel descended through the clouds, touching down at the sprawling spaceport outside New York. Dylan emerged to a hero's welcome, his crew beside him, their faces alight with the thrill of discovery. In the days that followed, stories began to circulate of the marvels they had witnessed, of lush, verdant worlds teeming with exotic life forms, of advanced civilizations with technology that made even the Argonians seem primitive by comparison, of alliances forged in the spirit of peace and cooperation, the promise of a brighter future for all. But even as humanity basked in the glow of its triumphs, Dylan seemed troubled. In quiet moments when the cameras were off and the crowds had dispersed, I caught glimpses of a man haunted by some unspoken burden. It wasn't until much later, over a bottle of whiskey in the dim light of his quarters, that he confided in me. "Something's not right," he said, his voice low and strained. "The Argonians, they're not telling us everything." He spoke of whispers and rumors, of a nameless fear that seemed to grip even the highest echelons of Argonian command, of a threat lurking in the shadows of the cosmos, ancient and inscrutable, stirring from its slumber. As he delved deeper, piecing together fragments of intelligence and hearsay, a picture began to emerge. The Argonians, it seemed, had an agenda all their own, a grand design for the future of the galaxy, and Earth, for all our importance as allies, was but a single piece on the galactic chessboard. The revelation hit Dylan hard. The trust he had placed in the Argonians, the bond of brotherhood forged in the crucible of war, all of it called into question. He pored over every scrap of evidence, every whispered conversation and encrypted transmission, desperate for answers. Finally, unable to bear the weight of his suspicions any longer, he made a fateful decision. He would journey to the heart of Argonian space itself, to the shining cities and towering spires of their homeworld. There, he would confront the truth, whatever the cost. I watched as Dylan boarded his ship, his face a mask of grim determination. He knew the risks, knew that he was walking into the lion's den, but his duty to Earth, to the truth, compelled him forward. When he finally returned, I barely recognized the man who stood before me. His eyes were haunted, his shoulders slumped beneath an invisible weight. In the privacy of his quarters, the story came tumbling out. The Argonians had known about the looming threat that dwarfed even the Bajorans in their malevolence, a race of beings from beyond the galaxy's edge, ancient and inscrutable, stirring from their long slumber. The Argonians believed that only by uniting the galaxy under their banner, by marshalling every race and every resource, could they hope to stand against the coming darkness. And Earth. We were the key. Our tenacity, our indomitable spirit, our prowess in battle. The Argonians saw in us the potential for a powerful ally, or a dangerous rival. And so they had orchestrated everything, from the Bajoran conflict to the alliance itself, all to bring us into their fold. Dylan's world shattered with the weight of this revelation. Everything he had fought for, everything he believed in, called into question. The Argonians had used us, manipulated us, all the while presenting themselves as our saviors and friends. He faced an impossible choice. To expose the truth would be to risk everything, the alliance, the fragile peace, the very future of humanity. But to remain silent, to be complicit in the Argonians' deceit, it was a betrayal of all he held dear. In the end, there was no clear answer. Dylan returned to his duties, his heart heavy with the burden of his knowledge. He would continue to serve, to lead, to protect his people as best he could. But he knew, deep in his bones, that the greatest challenge was yet to come. That one day the fate of the galaxy itself would hang in the balance. As he looked out across the stars, Dylan clung to the words of Commodore Zara, spoken in a quiet moment before the mission that changed everything. "In the vastness of the cosmos," she had said, "we are but small and fleeting things, but that does not make our struggles, our triumphs and our losses any less meaningful, for it is in the striving, in the reaching for something greater than ourselves, that we find our true purpose, and that, in the end, is the most human thing of all." With those words echoing in his heart, Dylan steeled himself for the trials ahead, for he knew that the story of humanity was still being written and that the pen was in their hands. Come what may, the galaxy would be watching. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.